Welcome to IMF Inspired. I'm so glad that so many of you are in the audience. This is a very popular segment of our annual meetings. One of the goals of the IMF Inspired is to bring unique voices to the annual meetings. Today, we have taken the assignment quite literally, featuring someone many of us have been listening to for many, many years. So let me introduce the person behind that distinctive voice. And I can tell you, we introduced each other. I heard the voice, and immediately memories of programs came to life. Our inspiring guest today is Mary Louise Kelly, the co-host of All Things Considered, the flagship news program on NPR. Mary Louise is a veteran radio journalist, podcaster, and author. She was also NPR's national security correspondent for a decade, which sent her to fascinating and complicated destinations like North Korea, Iran, Ukraine, just to name a few. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, and she has also published 2 novels. So let's just say that she has been busy. Throughout her career, Mary Louise has brought stories to life from those very faraway destinations, but some of her recent work comes, well, from home. She tells of her personal experience where she, like many of us, navigates the demands of family, career, and the march of time. It is a story we all understand, and that was described so poignantly in her most recent book, the New York Times bestseller, It Goes So Fast. I can't wait to hear more from you. Actually, I'll tell you, it is a page turner, and you wouldn't want to know what happens of those that she writes about. As always, we would have our own Sabina Bhatia. She launched IMF Inspired, and she has stayed with it, never mind where her career at the fund would take her. She started it in COM, then she moved to the Secretary's Department, but kept IMF Inspired, and when we promoted her to be director of our Corporate Services Department, she accepted under the condition that IMF Inspired stays with her. Good. So let's give a very warm welcome to Mary Louise and to Sabina Bhatia. And let's the fun begin.
Thank you very much, Kristalina, for your very warm remarks. So, Mary Louise, we are delighted to have you here.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you, Sabina and Kristalina, and all of you for coming.
Yeah, and a warm welcome to our audience here and online. And it's great to see so many people on the first day of our annual meetings. So just a quick reminder for those, we have closed captioning here. So all you need to do is scan the QR code onto your device, and the captioning will appear on your mobile device. So let's get started. Mary Louise, as Kristalina said, you know, all of us here feel that we know you because we listen to your voice every day.
We are so grateful. Thank you.
So it's a real pleasure for me to have this conversation with you and to hear more about your book. So today we're going to talk about your journey, the pressures that women in leadership positions face, and you know, and how to show up fully, whether in the newsroom or at home.
Indeed.
So let's get started with your book, It Goes So Fast, The Year of No Do-Overs. So I must say this book resonated with me deeply. And I think most of the people here, not just women, but men as well, struggle with balancing the different roles we play and the choices we make on a daily basis. In my case, I'm an IMF staff member, but I'm also a mother, a wife, daughter. So balancing these roles. So we want to hear from you on your choices, your experience, and what led you to write this book.
Sure. I think I'll begin just by laying out the dilemma that got me writing this. I have 2 sons. They are 2 years apart, and they both, all through their childhood, lived for football, by which I mean soccer, obviously. They grew up here in Washington. They played from before they could walk. They were pushing a soccer ball down the hallway and into our kitchen. And when they both hit high school and were teenagers, they played on their varsity team here for their high school in Washington, and their games were weekdays at 4 p.m. And I have a conflict weekdays at 4 p.m., that is to the minute the exact time that All Things Considered goes on the air. And so I miss their games, because All Things Considered is not going to shift programming for my son's high school sports commitments. And I was mostly okay with that for years, missing every game, because there were so many games. There were like thousands of games. And when my older son was beginning his final year of school, it suddenly hit me like a brick. There's a schedule, and there's like 10. And if I do not find a way to show up, I will have missed them all. Like, there is no figuring this out next season, next year, next time. I have to make a different choice now. And it was such a precise encapsulation of that dilemma you just nailed, about wanting to be true, wanting to be good at the 2 things that matter most to me, that have defined me, my work, my family, and that I could not physically be in 2 places at once. And the last thing I'll say is I think it also, what I ended up doing was writing that year in real time and making some different choices and stepping away from the anchor chair and going to quite a few high school soccer games. It made me realize those felt like such little choices every Wednesday, 4 o'clock, because there's going to be another Wednesday and another. And I did okay, I think, while my kids were growing up, at the big decisions. The annual meeting, the huge interview at work, I showed up for that, and my family organized around it. The big birthdays, the championship games, I showed up for those for my kids, and I organized my work around it. It was the Wednesday 4 o'clock games that were so nothing, such a little thing, and then you realize my choice to miss those added up to the choice of what I was prioritizing in my life. And for all of us, that gray area, that's not the huge decisions, but the little ones that adds up to the life we're leading. And that felt worth examining for a year.
Yeah. It's all those little choices every day that you have to make in the morning. Do I go to that, school performance, or do I go to that important meeting that I don't want to miss, right? And so we're making those choices every day. So you had many memorable episodes in your book, but the one that really stayed with me was the helicopter incident in Baghdad. Could you share that with the audience?
When my boys were young, in the case of that story, they were 4 and 6 years old. And I was working as Pentagon correspondent for NPR. Part of that job involved trailing the Secretary of Defense or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs when they travel. There are reporters on the plane, and you're documenting who they meet with and what gets discussed. And on that particular trip, let's see, if my son was 4, this would have been 2009.
That's Alexander?
2009, so war was raging still in Iraq. And they moved the U.S. Secretary of Defense around by helicopter because the streets were not safe for a motorcade. Even inside the green zone, you moved in helicopters. So we had just pulled out of southern Iraq and flown up and landed the secretary's plane inside the then US Green Zone in Baghdad. And the way they were going to move him to his first meeting was a bunch of Blackhawks. So one touches down and he gets in the first one and goes. And then the second one touches down and, the most senior generals and admirals traveling with him go. And they, 9 helicopters later, the reporters are there because there's incoming fire. And if somebody's going to get shot, better the press pool than the secretary. So we're wearing full body armor, even inside the green zone, and helmets and all the rest. And my phone rang, and it was the school nurse here calling to tell me that my 4-year-old is sick. And how fast can I get there? And I think I probably laughed. I think I probably was like, lady, if you could see me, it's not today, not tomorrow, 3 days at the bare minimum. And helicopters are loud, so I was having trouble hearing her, and she started screaming and said, I don't mean to bring him home, I mean he's really sick. He's struggling to breathe, we need to get him to a hospital now. Where are you? And I started trying to do the time zone calculation, and where is my husband, and where is the babysitter, and who can get there, and while I'm talking to her, I lost signal. And the helicopter for us touches down, and I have to get in it. They're not waiting for me. And I remember being in the air, in body armor, in a helicopter, looking down over Baghdad, and not knowing if my son was breathing, and just thinking, what am I doing? I love my work, and I'm good at it. And I worked so hard to get here. And I am thousands of miles away, and I don't know if my son is breathing, and I need to figure out a different life plan. And on the plane back to Joint Base Andrews, I started writing what became my first novel, because I was trying to figure out what can I do that would be meaningful work, but where I am not thousands of miles away. My son is fine. He grew up. He's now 20 years old and breathing just fine. His father got there within in plenty of time to help him. But it was one of those defining moments where you realize it's time for Plan B. So I left.
Is that when you decide to leave NPR?
That's when I decided to leave. It took me a few months to take the leap, but I did, and I stayed away from journalism with the occasional foray, but 5-6 years. Wrote a couple of novels and was around. Made it to a lot of soccer games.
And did you have any FOMO?
Oh yeah.
Missing work?
Oh yeah. I remember, as it was during those years, running into a former competitor, a reporter at another news organization who'd covered the national security and defense beat. And I was a stay-at-home mom at that point, and she did not recognize me because I was not dressed in, I was, no makeup, no hair, old Gap sweatshirt, taking my son to the park. And we chatted for a minute, and then she said, well, I gotta go. I have an interview at the White House. It was lovely to see you, whatever your name is that I can't remember, bye-bye. And she took off and left, and I stood there thinking, it felt like she'd slapped me. I remember thinking, she didn't recognize me. I'm not sure I recognized myself in this moment. And the end to that story is several years later, I was back. I'd gone back into journalism as full-time, all out, running around, traveling the world. And I ran into her again, and we chatted for a minute. And then as she turned to go, she said, I just need to tell you, I cried that whole day after I ran into you. And I said, why? You looked great. You were off to do this glamorous job. And she said, I had just dropped my baby at daycare where a stranger was going to take her to the park, and you were off to the park with your son, and you looked so happy, and he looked so happy, and I thought, what am I even doing with my life? And I said, I looked at you and thought the same thing. I thought, what have I even done? I threw my whole career away. What am I even doing with my life? Yeah. And Sabina, she looked at me and she said, you were singing. Oh. You were walking him to the park and you were singing. And I think my takeaway from that is the grass is always greener. Maybe there is some truth to I hate, the old kernel about you can have it all but not all at once, but there is some truth to it. But I think my main takeaway is we were both doing fine. Mm-hmm. Our kids were both doing fine, and it all works out.
I think what I liked about your book very much is that you're not judgy at all. You don't pass judgment on people's choices.
I'm super judgy in real life, so I'm glad
okay,
that
all
didn't happen.
So do you have any regrets on the choices you've made over the years?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it goes both ways. There are soccer games that I regret missing. There are mornings in the kitchen making pancakes that I thought would always be there, but kids grow up and the last thing they need is, they don't want to be with mom making pancakes in the kitchen. They got places to go and people to see and they're out. So there are things I regret that go that way. There are jobs I didn't take because they were not going to work with my family. There are interviews I didn't get to do. There was one, this would have been 2016, 2017. I was covering the intelligence beat. Mm-hmm. And then candidate Donald Trump was running for president and the whole Russia story broke. And without getting into all of the details of that, suddenly everybody was very interested in what was happening in Russia and what kind of contacts there may have been in terms of interference in American elections. And I went to Russia, did reporting from Russia, put in an interview request for the head of the SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Agency, one of the two successors along with the FSB to the KGB. And the head of the SVR does not give interviews to the Western press. I mean, it just doesn't happen. And so I did this kind of because you have to go through the motions, never expecting they would say yes, and they said yes. And so we had to scramble to get a visa, and we're all set to go. And then we get a note that they need to change the date to, I can't remember, a week or two after the originally scheduled date. And that put it right in the middle of a really long planned family vacation. That was not one I could easily join. It was like once it was a safari, and they would have been in the middle of it. I would have missed the whole thing, and I really, really thought about it, and I ended up turning down the head of Russian intelligence in the middle of the whole Russia story so I could be on safari. And I'm glad I did, and it was the right choice for my family, and I will hit my head against a wall in frustration and annoyance at that, when I'm an old lady many years from now. So it goes both ways.
Truly, it does for both ways. Yeah, it's really hard to square that.
Yeah.
I think one just has to take the decisions that feel right in your gut in the moment.
Very much.
Yeah. So just switching gears, I want to talk a little bit about your career as a journalist. Your beat on NPR has been national security, foreign policy, and you've been in many hotspots around the world, right? You've been to North Korea, Iran, Afghanistan. And you've talked about the importance of having boots on the ground, having reporters on the ground, bearing witness. Why is that so important?
I could answer that in a number of ways. I think partly we are living in an environment where the media is so fractured. We all listen in our little bubbles and watch in our bubbles and read what we want to read, and then our feed serves up more of the same, so we're getting different news streams. It's much more fractured than when I entered the business 30 years ago. And the business model is also shifting. It is very hard for news organizations to figure out how you make ends meet these days, and nobody's quite figured it out. And so it is much cheaper to do analysis, opinion. It's much cheaper for me to sit in a studio here in Washington and never get outside the Beltway and talk to people about what they think about things. And there's value to that because there's some very smart people with very informed and interesting opinions. But I would submit that part of the problem that has led to mistrust of media, it's one part, but is that we've gotten away from reporting. Going somewhere saying, this is what I see, this is what I hear, this is what people are telling me, and you're smart enough to make up your own minds what you want to think about it. And I can report something and you will arrive at, 100 different conclusions about what should be done about it. That's great. That's the way it should work. But it's expensive to put me on a plane with the team. It's expensive to maintain full-time bureaus. This picture that's up is North Korea, Pyongyang, where it is very, very difficult as a journalist, certainly as an American journalist, to get a visa. That was 2017. And we were offered visas, and I knew that we would not be able to report freely. We had an interpreter who was assigned to us, a minder who was assigned to us, and was stuck like glue to my side the whole time. And I still believe it was so valuable to go and be able to see something, describe something, put questions to someone. I'll give another example. This is reporting from Iran in 2023, beginning of 2023. Also difficult to get a journalist visa if you're an American journalist. We did not get to go everywhere we wanted to go. We did not get to interview everyone we wanted to interview, but we were able to see and report things that were very different from the narrative that Americans would otherwise have understood. There had been big protests in that country that the government had managed to mostly quiet by the time we were there. And as we spoke to people, it became obvious that the spirit that had animated that protest had not gone away. It had been made quiet. You couldn't hear it. You wouldn't hear it on the streets. But you could hear it in people's homes and in tea rooms when they spoke to you. And to be able to go and share that with our audience, and then let our audience decide what they want to think about it, I think there's massive value in that, and you only get it if you go somewhere. You can't get it if you read the press releases and the images that a government puts out. You just can't.
Yeah, I think actually there's a lot that we can relate to, because although we are based in Washington, we are membership 191 countries. We really have to go to the countries to get a feel for what's going on, and talking to the ministries of finance, central banks. I know Kristalina when she's traveling, and I have Uma in the first row. She goes to Ukraine, and that it's. You really have to get out on the street, meet with the people there, talk to them to get a sense of what's going on. Let me ask you this. In some of the countries you go to, Afghanistan, for example, and maybe others as well, do you find that being a woman, you get access to more people to talk to?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have always found it a huge advantage to be a woman as a journalist, interviewer, foreign correspondent. It's easier to interrupt someone and not be accused of mansplaining, which I have found has been beneficial in interviews where officials go on and on and on, and you need to rein them in. But yes, there are Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran. I can go, and because I'm there for NPR or the BBC or whoever, I can go and ask questions of the Prime Minister or President, and they will sit down and take my questions. But a male reporter wouldn't be able to speak to half the population in some of these places. Even in Europe, in the West, I find being a woman, you can go back in the kitchen, you can ask, okay, I get what the policy decision is that we're here talking about, but what's for dinner? How much does it cost? Where do you buy it? What's your hope and your dream for your daughter who's helping you? What do you want her to grow up to be? Like, what can that world look like for her? How big can you dare to dream? And those are conversations that are just much easier to have as a woman, and I think it influences the kind of stories that I feel are worth telling. When I get on a plane, it's usually because there is an election, or there are big protests, or there's been a natural disaster, or there's a war. But the job for me is to get there and explain, okay, what does it matter? How does it impact one family, this one street, this one town? Those are the stories worth telling.
Yeah, and you've met some amazing women on these visits.
Sure.
And this is IMF inspired. So can you share with us some of the stories of the women you've met? I think you've talked in your book. You talk a lot about Hannah Hopko. Right?
That's a great one. Hannah Hopko is. I was sent to Ukraine in February of 2022. This is Hannah Hopko here. February of 2022, you will remember there were Russian tanks and troops lined up on the border of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin was insisting that they were not there for a war to attack, and prompted the question, well, what are they doing there? And so my team and I flew to Ukraine, and we spent some time in Kyiv, and then we went east into Donbass as close as we could get to the then lines. And we were talking to everyone who would take our questions about, how are you thinking about this? You're packing a go bag, what's the evacuation plan? And I sat down with Hannah Hopko because she had been a leader in the Maidan protests in 2014. She had then joined Parliament, been elected to Parliament, and had ended up running the Foreign Affairs Committee. So I arranged to meet Hannah Hopko because she'd had this big, powerful job, and I wanted to talk to her about NATO and troop movements and how her country was preparing for what might be coming. And we talked about all those things, and then she got distracted at one point because a text came in on her phone from her daughter. And she got a little flustered, and she said, I'm sorry, it's my daughter. I promised her that if she got really good grades, I would buy her a pet guinea pig.
Guinea pig.
Okay, and she said, and she unfortunately got really good grades, so now I have to buy her the guinea pig. And I'm thinking, where are we going with this? And then Hannah Hopko, who was this fearless, impressive woman, started crying. And she said, I have to keep my promise to my daughter. And Vladimir Putin is not allowed to take all of my joy. Like, my daughter gets to have a guinea pig, but I'm trying to figure out how to keep my family safe and how to evacuate if we need to evacuate, and how to get my parents to safety and my daughter to safety. And the thought of also being responsible for a rodent in a cage with the pellets and the water and the food and all of that, that was what was doing her in on that day. So she's telling me the story, she's crying, I start crying, we say. And I just thought, I think there is a younger version of me. I think there's a non-mom version of me who would have been like, okay, enough with the guinea pig. Can we get back to NATO? This version of me thought, that's the story. Like, that's the story, because most people here in America cannot relate to what it feels like to have 100,000 troops and tanks lined up on your border. But they can relate to the promises you make to your kids and wanting to honor them even when it makes life so much more complicated and expensive than it would otherwise have been. And they can relate to a mom trying to figure out, how do I keep my family safe? How do I keep a guinea pig safe in the event of a Russian invasion? So we reported the story, kept that part of the interview in, and I, to this day, Sabina, whenever there's a big development, when it's been a particularly bad night or something is happening in Ukraine, I get people writing to me saying, is the guinea pig okay? The little girl and the guinea pig, are they okay? And so far, they're okay.
It's the human stories that we can relate to. Yeah,
is.
Yeah, that's what really touches us. So I just want to shift gears a little bit and get your take on on the media. You've done radio, you've done broadcasts, and now you have a podcast, a wonderful podcast, Sources and Methods. I'm doing a bit of promo for you, Mary Louise. But when you look at so you've seen firsthand the dramatic shifts in the media landscape over the 3 decades you've been reporting. And we've also seen a shift in how people like us consume news, right? We all get it on our phones. Everything is a curated playlist. So when you look at how technology is shifting, AI coming, and you see a shift in consumer preferences, how do you think that's going to change your job in the newsroom?
It's already changing. NPR is National Public Radio. We're radio. That's what we do, is audio. But a lot of the interviews I do are now on camera, on video, because that will make news and get out on other platforms. Obviously, we have a website with the digital written version. That is pretty much every newsroom now. Every story you do, there are teams working to try to figure out how to do it on different platforms. Of the many challenges my industry faces, I actually find that one a hopeful one. Let's meet people where they are. Get the news where you're going to get it, consume it how you're going to get it. I'm fine with that. So much of my work that goes out on the radio, you can now get in a podcast. Great. My children are not listening to FM broadcast radio on the car as they drive around. They're getting it fed to their phone in podcasts, and that's great. The challenge I see, there's so many journalists, maybe too many journalists in Washington. There are not enough in other places. There are fewer and fewer local journalists in this country, which again gets to the mistrust. Why should anyone trust me, some woman they've never met, inside the Beltway? I think that is built from if you trust the local reporter who you know, whose kids go to school where your kids go to school, who lives down the block, who is your neighbor who is also doing their job, and we're losing that. And then we're also losing the other way. I mean, my job, I've always been based in London or Washington. I hate to use the term, but I am the journalist. I'm the anchor who gets parachuted in when there's big news. But the reason I'm able to do that in so many places, and hopefully do it well, is because NPR maintains 17 international bureaus worldwide. I think only the New York Times has more among major American bureaus. So it means on a huge day like today in the Middle East, where we saw hostages being released, and a day of celebrations across the region, and clearly many bridges yet to cross, we have a big bureau there with correspondents and interpreters and drivers who are there day in, day out, and can tell me, this looks really different than it did a month ago. This is how this looks different from the January ceasefire. Here's some perspective you need to know before you go interview Netanyahu. And that matters. That is expensive, and we are, many news organizations, losing that as well. So that is what gives me, that's what makes me kind of sweat and stay up awake with nightmares. But the ability to get news when we want it, where we want it, I'm good with that.
Good. If I can shift gears a bit and maybe ask you a few personal questions.
Okay.
You've been very open about your hearing loss. Can you talk to us about how you've coped with it as a parent and as a journalist?
Yeah. So I'm speaking to you today with hearing aids, both ears, and I got them right after I turned 40, when I thought everyone just mumbled all the time. And I'm now beyond the outer limits of what they can correct. These are the best hearing aids money can buy, and they can correct me to about 60% hearing. So I'm also looking at your lips, and it helps that you're mic'd. In the studio, doing interviews at NPR, I can hear just fine. And I think that it's pin drop silence. I'm listening with big professional quality headphones on, and I can turn them as loud as I need. In the field, going to try to interview somebody in a protest. Why are you protesting? What are you mad about? What are you hoping will change? What are your questions for your government? That's hard. And it's getting harder. Just in August, I was in Anchorage for the Putin-Trump summit, trying to figure out a ceasefire for Ukraine, which has not happened yet, alas. Trump and Putin came out. We're in a room not much bigger than this. Putin is speaking Russian, Trump is speaking English, so they have tiny little headsets on your seats. And for the Americans who are on the right side of the room, they're translating Putin live, simultaneous interpretation, as many of you are used to working with. On the little dinky headsets they gave us, cranked as loud as I could crank it, I couldn't even tell if I was on the right channel. Is this the English channel or the Russian channel? I so couldn't hear it, I couldn't even tell which language we were on. And my producer, who's sitting near me, I put him on his ears and I said, "Can you hear this? Is this actually on? Is it just my device?" And he said, "I can totally hear that. You can't?" And I'm live broadcasting this. I'm anchoring this from inside the room, trying to tell people across America what Putin is saying, and I'm thinking, I can't hear it. So it's presents challenges. It means I'd have to do my job in a different way sometimes than my co-anchors do. They route interviews when I'm at home in a different way than for my colleagues. And what I have learned is speaking up and asking for what I need to do my job. Because so far there's always been a workaround and we figured it out. In that case, we had my producer live transcribing what he could hear, and I'm relaying just the headlines, and then I told my co-anchor in Washington, take me out for 5 minutes, let me figure this out. We managed to figure out a new thing, a new hearing setup that I could hear, and critically, those 5 minutes gave me 5 minutes where I'm not talking, where I could think about what did I just hear, let me synthesize it, let me figure out what the next questions are, and so when I came back, I was able to take over the air and have something worthwhile to say. So it was helpful in the end, or at least that's the way I'm choosing to think about it.
Mm-hmm. So there are many young people in the audience here. So Mary Louise, if you had to give advice to your 25-year-old self, what would that be?
That might be what we were just talking about. You don't have to do it all by yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't have to just white knuckle through and just work harder. Working hard is good. Mm-hmm. But finding ways to build a team where you are working to make each other better, that took me a while to learn. I was such a loner reporter out in the world, and it took me a while, particularly with hearing. But with everything I do, to realize if I ask for help, this will end up making my work better, and I may end up doing it in a different way. And it took me years to learn that. The other thing, and I think, we've all been here, but my 25-year-old self was so racing toward a finish line, whatever that finish line was. And when you're doing that, each hurdle, each setback feels devastating. And I wish I had known what I know now, which is you're going to end up in a helicopter in Baghdad and decide to quit. And you're going to walk away from news for 5 or 6 years. And it's going to be okay. You're going to write a couple books. You can come back. I'm trying to figure out what the next chapter looks like now. My kids, you have a daughter off at college. My 2 are off at college. I don't have to, when I go to Ukraine, I'm not sorting soccer carpools from Donbass. I'm not trying to figure out what's for dinner and who's going to pick up somebody in Washington. I wish I had known not just that life is going to throw you some curveballs and you're going to have to zig and zag a lot more than you thought, but that's the good stuff. Enjoy those ones. It doesn't feel like it in the moment when you have a big setback and you have to stop and reassess and come out the other way, but every single time it's worked out fine and probably for the better.
So it all works out in the end. I think it's a good message for everyone. Yes, we hope.
We're knocking on wood.
So a final question. You've talked about this being Act 3 in your life. So what does Act 3 look like for Mary Louise Kelly?
I don't know. It's such a good question. I have another book in me. I have been wrestling with, I have another spy thriller that I would like to write. And I have been wrestling the last couple of years, and especially this year, with the feeling that maybe that was beside the point. That there was so much that feels urgent happening here in Washington right now. Whatever your politics, as a journalist, it's just so much that needs to be investigated and reported and fact-checked and written and broadcast and go. And really, I'm gonna make up a story. Like, there's so much that's actually happening that we must deal with every day. And I think in the last couple of months, I've come around to thinking, no, it's not beside the point, it is the point. In a world that feels divided, in a country, the United States, that feels so bitterly divided, we can all still enjoy the power of a good story. We can all still come together over a good book and be rooting for, the heroine or hero to win. And I think I think I need to carve out the time to do that and let a few of the daily headlines, let somebody else cover them or let them take care of themselves. So I have a story. My protagonist, I haven't figured out yet if she's going to be deaf or struggling with hearing loss, but I'd like to elevate that a little bit. Let people see how someone who is dealing with a very invisible disability moves through the world, and how it might help her from time to time. Like maybe she is processing the world in a different way and might figure out who the bad guy is sooner. So I'd like to have a little bit more time to write and have that feel worthwhile and empowering and not like a sidebar. So that's one answer to the question.
Great. So it sounds like we have an inspiring spy novel in the making.
We shall see.
Okay, that's
We shall
great.
see.
Let's end on that note. Ladies and gentlemen, Mary Louise Kelly, let's hand it to her. Thank you.
Thank you.